Life has a way of changing in an instant. One minute you're 32, happily married and planning your future. The next, you're a widow sorting through cremation options because your husband's body was too damaged to have an open casket. That's what happened to me 6 months ago. My husband, Mark, died in a car accident that left me drowning in grief and struggling to find my footing in this new reality. The first few weeks were a blur of funeral arrangements, consoling phone calls, and sleepless nights. If it wasn't for my parents stepping in to handle most of the funeral details, I'm not sure how I would have managed. "Karen, honey, we've arranged everything with the funeral home," Mom had said, her voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "You just focus on yourself right now." The support group for people who lost loved ones became my lifeline. Every Tuesday evening, I'd sit in a circle with others who understood the hollowness in my chest. "Some days are harder than others," I shared during one session, my voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I wake up and for a split second I forget he's gone." Maria, another group member who lost her husband 2 years ago, reached over and squeezed my hand. "That's normal, sweetie. The grief comes in waves." As the months passed, I started dealing with practical matters. Mark had left me well provided for, our house in the suburbs, an apartment downtown, and a substantial bank account. I could have quit my job at the marketing firm, but the thought of sitting alone in our empty house all day made my skin crawl. Instead, I switched to part-time, working just enough to keep my mind occupied. The most surprising change came in my relationship with my parents. Growing up, I'd always felt like an afterthought compared to my younger sister Jessica. They never missed her dance recitals or school plays, while my academic achievements barely warranted a congratulations. But after Mark's death, something shifted. When they asked if I could help them financially with a monthly transfer of $1,500, I agreed without hesitation. The weekly dinners at my parents' house had become a comforting routine. Mom would cook her famous pot roast, Dad would pour the wine, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had their full attention. "Karen, tell us more about that new project you're working on," Dad would say, actually interested in my work for once. "The marketing campaign's going well," I'd share, savoring these moments of connection. "My boss thinks it might bring in several new clients." But everything shifted the night Jessica joined us for dinner. My younger sister walked in, 7 months pregnant, her presence immediately commanding the room like it always had. She'd been living in a rented apartment across town, and I hadn't seen her since Mark's funeral. "Jessica, sweetie, sit here," Mom fussed, practically pushing me aside to make room for her favorite daughter. "Do you need another pillow? Are your feet swollen?" Just like that, I became invisible again. It was like watching a switch flip. Suddenly, all their attention was laser-focused on Jessica and her pregnancy. The familiar ache of being overlooked settled back into my chest, an old friend I'd foolishly thought I'd left behind. "So who's the father?" I asked during dinner, trying to join the conversation. "Have you told him about the baby?" Jessica's face darkened. "That's my business," she snapped, pushing her food around her plate. "I don't need to share every detail of my personal life." Mom jumped to her defense immediately. "Karen, don't pry. Your sister doesn't have to explain herself to anyone." I couldn't help but notice how different this response was from when I was going through fertility treatments. Back then, they'd had no problem demanding updates and offering unsolicited advice about my personal life. "But how are you planning to manage on your own?" I pressed during another dinner, watching her heap seconds onto her plate. "Babies are expensive." Jessica waved her hand dismissively, that familiar smirk playing on her lips. "Don't worry about my baby. We won't need anything from anyone. I've got it all figured out." I should have paid more attention to that mysterious smile, but I'd seen it too many times before. Jessica was always cooking up get-rich-quick schemes that never panned out. the organic smoothie business that lasted 2 weeks, the life coaching certification she never finished, the cryptocurrency investment that lost her 3 months' rent. "Trust me," she said, patting her belly with an air of confidence that should have set off alarm bells. "This time, everything's going to work out exactly as planned." Dad beamed at her like she'd just announced a cure for cancer. That's my girl, always landing on her feet. I took another bite of pot roast, trying to swallow down the familiar feeling of being second best. Some things never change, I thought, watching my parents hang on Jessica's every word. The call from Jessica came on a Tuesday morning. I was at my desk reviewing marketing reports when my phone lit up with her name. I almost let it go to voicemail. Our conversations were usually brief and awkward, but something made me answer. "Karen." Her voice had that sugary sweetness she only used when she wanted something. "I'm having my baby shower next weekend at Mom and Dad's. I'd really love it if you could come." The invitation caught me off guard. The last real conversation we'd had was at Mark's funeral, and even then, she'd seemed distracted and uncomfortable. "Are you sure?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. I could count on one hand the number of times Jessica had voluntarily included me in anything. "Of course," she laughed, the sound oddly forced. "You're my only sister. It wouldn't be right without you. Plus, I have something special planned." Something in her tone made my stomach clench, but I pushed the feeling aside. "I'll be there," I promised, already mentally listing possible gift ideas. Maybe this was her way of trying to bridge the gap between us. The following Saturday, I arrived at my parents' house carrying 2 carefully wrapped packages, a high-end baby monitor and a handmade blanket. Despite our differences, this was my future niece or nephew. The place looked like a pastel explosion had hit it. Pink and blue balloons were everywhere, streamers hung from every surface, and a towering diaper cake held court as the centerpiece. Trust Jessica to turn this into an event. She'd invited what looked like half the town. Aunt Margaret was there with her daughters. Mom's bridge club friends occupied the sofa, and Jessica's old college roommates clustered around the punch bowl, giggling over some shared memory. "Time for games," Jessica announced, wading through the crowd in a flowing maternity dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was glowing, but there was something predatory in her smile that made me uneasy. Her eyes kept finding mine across the room, holding my gaze a beat too long. We played all the traditional baby shower games, measuring Jessica's belly with string, guessing the baby's birth date, and that horrible melted chocolate bar in a diaper game. I won the belly measuring contest, which seemed to irritate Jessica more than it should have. Throughout it all, she kept shooting these strange looks my way, like she was waiting for something. After the gifts were opened, Jessica cooing over each onesie and baby gadget with theatrical enthusiasm, she reached my presence. She held up the blanket, running her fingers over the intricate pattern. Then she clinked her glass for attention. The room fell silent, and my heart started racing for no reason I could name. The air felt suddenly thick, hard to breathe. "I want to thank everyone for coming today," she began, one hand resting on her swollen belly. "But there's something else I need to share. I think it's time everyone knew who the father of my baby is." My heart started pounding. Jessica's eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, I knew. I knew before the words even left her mouth, but that didn't lessen the impact. "The father," she said, her voice ringing through the suddenly silent room, "is Mark Wilson, Karen's late husband." The world tilted sideways. Through the roaring in my ears, I could hear gasps and whispers from the guests. Aunt Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Jessica's college friends huddled closer together, whispering frantically. But what hit me hardest was the lack of surprise on my parents' faces. They had known all along. Before I could process what was happening, Jessica was already speaking again, her voice dripping with satisfaction as she turned to face me directly. "As Mark's baby is his only heir, I'm entitled to half of everything he left you, Karen. The house, the apartment, the money. My child deserves their father's inheritance. The room spun. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. Then, Mom and Dad stepped forward, flanking Jessica like bodyguards. "Karen," Dad said, using his stern business voice, "you need to do the right thing here. Your nephew deserves his father's legacy." I found my voice, though it came out as a rasp. "You're lying! All of you are lying! Mark would never—" "Oh, no." Jessica's smile turned cruel as she pulled out her phone. "Then how do you explain these?" She held up the screen, and my world collapsed all over again. There they were, Mark and Jessica, wrapped in each other's arms, kissing in what looked like a hotel room. Another photo showed them holding hands in a restaurant I didn't recognize. "He loved me," Jessica declared, her voice carrying across the silent room. "He was planning to leave you for me. We were going to tell everyone, but then—" She choked up, tears streaming down her face. "Then the accident happened, and all our plans—" I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My body moved on autopilot, gathering my purse, pushing past the whispering guests, stumbling out to my car. I heard Mom calling after me, but I was already backing out of the driveway. The drive home was a blur. My mind kept replaying those photos, trying to make sense of them. The restaurant photos must have been taken during those business trips he claimed to have. The hotel, probably during his frequent work conferences. My phone started buzzing as soon as I walked through my front door. Jessica was sending messages, dozens of them. Screenshots of conversations between her and Mark. "I don't love her anymore. I haven't for a long time. We'll tell everyone after the divorce. You're the only one I want to be with. I can't wait to start our life together." Message after message appeared on my screen, each one a fresh knife in my heart. The timestamps showed conversations going back months. My husband and my sister plotting their future while I underwent fertility treatments, believing I was the problem in our marriage. I spent that night pacing through my house, touching Mark's things, and wondering if everything about our life together had been a lie. The first call from my parents came at 7 a.m. sharp. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Karen, you need to be reasonable about this," Dad started, not even bothering with a greeting. "The sooner you agree to split the inheritance, the easier this will be for everyone." The casual arrogance in his voice made my blood boil. "Easier for whom? For Jessica? For you? For all of you?" "Karen, honey," Mom chimed in. I was on speakerphone. "You don't want this to get messy, dear." The word dear came out as barely more than a whisper. "When did you know about them?" There was a pause, the kind of hesitation that tells you everything you need to know before a word is spoken. We've known for a while," Mom finally admitted. "Mark confided in us about 6 months before the accident. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. 6 months. They'd known for 6 months, and still let me cry on their shoulders at his funeral. Still accepted my money every month while knowing what he and Jessica had done. Traitors. The word fell cold and final on my tongue. "All of you?" I hung up and blocked their numbers. My hands shook as I opened my banking app, but I didn't hesitate to cancel the monthly transfer to their account. Let them ask their precious Jessica for money. 2 weeks passed in a fog of missed calls and ignored text messages. Then came Jessica's email. She'd sue me if I didn't voluntarily give up half of everything. The word voluntarily had never looked so much like a curse. I couldn't bear to reply, couldn't bear to think about Mark's betrayal, about how many people must have known, must have seen them together while I remained oblivious. The whispers at work became unbearable. Pitying looks from some colleagues, barely concealed smirks from others. Tom, my boss and one of the few true friends I had left, called me into his office after I broke down in the middle of a client meeting. "Take some time off," he said gently. "Paid or unpaid, whatever works for you. Your job will be here when you're ready to come back. I nodded gratefully and packed up my desk that same day. The next few weeks blurred together as I became a hermit in my own home. I had groceries delivered, ignored the doorbell when it rang, and spent hours staring at old photos, trying to spot the signs I must have missed. Every happy memory now felt like a mockery, every moment of our marriage tainted by the knowledge that he had been living a double life with my own sister. The news came via Facebook. Jessica had given birth to a boy. The photo showed her beaming in a hospital bed, our parents hovering proudly over their new grandson. The baby was wrapped in the cream-colored blanket I had knitted for the shower, which felt like a deliberate jab. I closed the app before I could read the comments, but not before noticing she'd named him Mark Jr. A week later, the court summons arrived in a thick manila envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it, already knowing what I'd find inside. Jessica was suing for half of everything Mark had left me, claiming her son's right to his father's inheritance. The legal language was cold and precise, laying out her demands in stark black and white. She wanted the house, half the money, and partial ownership of the downtown apartment. I spent 3 days researching lawyers before settling on Richard Martinez, who came highly recommended for handling complex inheritance cases. "Miss Wilson," he said, shuffling through the papers on his desk, his expression carefully neutral. "I have to be honest with you. Your sister has compelling evidence of a long-term relationship with your late husband. Text messages, photos, witness statements, including your own parents." He paused, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "In inheritance cases like this, proof of an intimate relationship combined with a biological child, well, the courts tend to be sympathetic." I was still processing this devastating news when my phone rang that evening. Unknown number. "Hello? Is this Karen Wilson?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar, but somehow striking a chord of recognition. Something in the cadence, the tone, made my heart skip. "I'm Elizabeth Parker, Mark's mother." The world tilted sideways. I gripped the kitchen counter for support. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Mark was an orphan. He told me his parents died when he was young." Another one of his lies. "He grew up in foster care, I'm afraid." Her voice was bitter but not unkind. "Would you be willing to meet with me? There are things you need to know, things that might help you." We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown the next morning, neutral ground. I arrived early, my stomach in knots, ordered a coffee I couldn't drink, and nearly dropped the cup when she walked in. The resemblance was uncanny. Mark had her eyes, her smile, even the way she carried herself. She moved with the same fluid grace I'd always admired in him. "I was at the funeral," she said, after we'd settled into a corner booth, far from curious ears. "Back row, black dress and veil. I couldn't bring myself to approach you then. Mark and I hadn't spoken in years." I remembered her suddenly, the solitary figure who'd slipped out before the service ended. I'd been too lost in my own grief to wonder who she was, but now the memory crystallized with perfect clarity. The elegant woman in black, standing apart from the other mourners, her face hidden behind a dark veil. "Why are you coming forward now?" I asked, trying to keep the suspicion out of my voice. After all the recent revelations about Mark, I found it hard to trust anything or anyone connected to him. Elizabeth reached into her handbag and pulled out a manila envelope, worn at the edges as if it had been carried around for a long time. "Because I've heard about what your sister is claiming, and because despite everything, I can't let another woman suffer from my son's lies." Her fingers trembled slightly as she slid the envelope across the table. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside were medical records from Boston General Hospital, dated 10 years ago, about a year before Mark and I got married. My eyes scanned the document, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Complete azoospermia, permanently sterile, No possibility of natural conception. The clinical terms jumped out at me, each one a fresh blow. Mark had these tests done when he was 25, Elizabeth explained softly. He was devastated by the results. It was one of the last things we discussed before our falling out. I couldn't speak. All those years of fertility treatments, the endless doctor's appointments, the hormone injections, the tears and self-blame, it had all been a cruel charade. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. Jessica sat in the front row, cradling baby Mark Jr., while our parents flanked her protectively. She dressed the part of the grieving almost widow perfectly. Demure black dress, minimal makeup, practiced look of sorrow. When she took the stand, she played to the gallery masterfully, tears glistening in her eyes as she described her great love with Mark. "All I want is what's fair for my son," she declared, her voice breaking. "He deserves his father's legacy." My lawyer, Mr. Martinez, waited until she'd finished her performance before he spoke. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that proves Miss Thompson's entire claim is fraudulent." He approached the bench with the hospital records. The judge reviewed the documents, her expression unchanging. Jessica's lawyer jumped up, objecting about chain of custody and document authenticity. Jessica's composure cracked. "Those documents are fake!" she shrieked, clutching the baby closer. "She forged them to steal my baby's inheritance." "Your Honor," Mr. Martinez continued calmly, "given these medical records show Mr. Wilson was sterile, we request a DNA test to establish paternity." Jessica's smile was triumphant. "That's impossible. Mark was an orphan and his body was cremated. There's no one to test against." "Actually," Mr. Martinez said, gesturing to the gallery, "I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Parker, Mark Wilson's biological mother." Elizabeth stood, and a murmur ran through the courtroom. Even from where I sat, I could see Jessica's face turn ashen. "I'm willing to submit to a DNA test," Elizabeth announced clearly, "to determine if this child is my grandson." The judge nodded. "DNA testing is ordered. We'll reconvene when the results are available." Jessica swayed slightly in her seat, all color drained from her face. Our mother rushed to support her, shooting me a venomous look. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope. The courtroom was silent as the judge opened the envelope containing the DNA test results. Jessica sat rigidly in her chair, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, unaware of the drama unfolding around him. "The results conclusively show," the judge announced, her voice clear and firm, "that there is no genetic relationship between the minor child and Mrs. Elizabeth Parker. Therefore, it can be concluded that Mark Wilson was not the father of this child." A collective gasp filled the room. Jessica's face crumpled as she began to sob, mascara running down her cheeks. "Miss Thompson," the judge's voice had turned stern, "would you care to explain why you perpetrated this fraud upon the court?" Jessica clutched the baby closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was seeing several men at the time. When Mark died and was cremated, I thought no one would ever know. He had money and I needed—" "So you attempted to defraud your own sister?" The judge's disapproval was palpable. "Used your parents as unwitting accomplices in this scheme?" "I just wanted security for my baby," Jessica whimpered. But her performance had lost its power. Even our parents looked stunned, finally realizing the extent of her deception. The judge's ruling was swift and unequivocal. "This court finds in favor of the defendant, Karen Wilson. All claims to Mark Wilson's estate by Jessica Thompson are dismissed with prejudice. Miss Thompson, you're fortunate that Mrs. Wilson hasn't pressed criminal charges for attempted fraud." Outside the courthouse, my parents approached me. Mom was crying, Dad looking older than I'd ever seen him. "Karen, sweetheart." Mom reached for my hand. "We had no idea Jessica was lying. We can make this right. We've been struggling since you stopped the monthly transfers." I held up my hand. Don't. Just don't. I pulled out my phone, blocked their numbers right there, and walked away without looking back. Elizabeth was waiting by my car. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I surprised myself by laughing. "You know what? I think I actually am. Or I will be." I took a deep breath. "I've been thinking. That apartment downtown that Mark left me. I never liked it much. Too many memories. But maybe you'd like it." Her eyes widened. "Karen, no, I couldn't possibly. Please," I insisted. "You gave me back my life with those medical records. Let me give you something in return." When I handed her the keys a week later, she broke down crying. "I never thought I'd have a daughter," she whispered as she hugged me. "That was 3 months ago. My family still tries to reach me through mutual friends and distant relatives, but I've cut those ties too. Jessica sent a letter claiming she's changed, that she's sorry, that she needs help with the baby." I threw it away unopened. Instead, I have weekly dinners with Elizabeth. We're getting to know each other, sharing stories about Mark, the good and the bad. She's helping me see that while he wasn't the man I thought he was, that doesn't invalidate all the happy moments we shared. Yesterday, I finally packed away Mark's remaining things. Elizabeth helped me donate some to charity and store others in the attic. As we worked, she told me stories about Mark as a little boy before the lies began. It helped somehow to know that version of him existed. I'm not ready to date yet, but I've started living again. I returned to work full-time, joined a hiking club, and I'm planning my first solo vacation. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I barely recognize the woman looking back at me. Life has a way of surprising you. I lost the family I was born into, but gained a new one I never expected. It's not the life I planned, but maybe it's the life I was meant to have all along. Story 2. My relatives were making fun of me in front of everyone when my wealthy uncle discovered that I was living in my vehicle and working 2 jobs to pay for college. Hello, everyone? Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. All right, Reddit, this will take a while. Since my brain has been whirling from all that has transpired, I, a 19-year-old woman, need to put everything in writing. I never would have imagined that I would be revealing my life story here, but whatever. Let's get started. It all began when my father received a cancer diagnosis. When I started high school at the age of 14, I assumed mathematics or whatever would be my toughest challenge. Dad had been experiencing fatigue for some time, but we assumed it was simply a result of work-related stress. Mom then sat me down in our kitchen one typical Tuesday after school and informed me that he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It was like watching a movie of someone else's life for the following 6 months. Dad lost all of his hair, became quite ill very quickly, and dropped a lot of weight. On him, his favorite Chicago Bears jersey resembled a tent. He made an effort to be lighthearted. Even though he was hardly able to sit up, he nonetheless assisted me with my math assignments. "Don't let your mom's cooking kill you before I get back," was his final advice to me. That was the case when they brought him to the hospital for the final time. Dad. You never fail to make me chuckle. On a Thursday, he passed away. It was supposed to be pizza night, which is why I remember. We had been having a deep dish every Thursday since I was a little child. Rather, I was sitting in a hospital waiting room with those dumb fluorescent lights that flickered, watching my mom sob into her phone while she communicated with our family members. That seemed like the worst thing I would ever experience in my life. I was mistaken, boy. Following Dad's death, Mom completely lost it. About 2 months later, they began dating. Said that she needed to feel alive once again or something. She got to know Derek in this way. Rich man, kind of real estate developer. He began to visit frequently, taking Mom on weekend excursions and bringing her expensive presents. I truly tried to be pleased for her. Her father wouldn't want her to stay depressed forever, would he? However, little than a year after her father's passing, she married Derek. Didn't even disclose their engagement to me. When she instructed me to try on a junior bridesmaid dress she had previously purchased, I learned the truth. The wedding took place at a posh Newport Beach country club. All of Derek's wealthy friends were present, observing us as though we were a charity case that Derek had taken in. I tried not to weep and hid in the restroom for the majority of the reception. Everything altered drastically at that point. Mom and Derek took up residence in his enormous Newport Beach home. We are referring to a location that has both a tennis court and a swimming pool. But you know what? I couldn't fit there. According to Mom, I would feel better at ease living in Chicago with my dad, sister, and Aunt Lisa. More cozy for her mother. I was therefore sent to Chicago like a parcel that no one desired. Aunt Lisa, Uncle Marcus, and my cousins Michael, 17, and Rebecca, 18, reside in this enormous home in Lincoln Park. When we were youngsters, we were really close. Every summer, they would come visit, and we would spend weeks creating silly games and erecting blanket forts. But wow, when I moved in, everything was different. All of a sudden, I was no longer their entertaining summer cousin. I was this unwelcome guest in their home. They began behaving as though I was occupying their space, consuming their food, or inhaling their valuable air, or something. Would Michael often knock over my belongings by accident? Rebecca might say something like, "Her clothes are too nice to lend me." But Aunt Lisa was the worst when I initially arrived without any winter supplies. Made it quite evident that I was a burden. Began collecting rent from me while I was still a high school student. Who even does that? Mom, who is pretty twisted up, stopped calling. Like, all the way. Sometimes she would send money. Aunt Lisa charged, not enough to really cover the rent, but that was all. She was usually too preoccupied with her new life to answer the phone when I attempted to reach her, too preoccupied with yoga, too busy attending charitable functions, too preoccupied to speak to her own child. On Facebook, I would see photos of her and Derek attending upscale parties while on vacation in Europe, living another existence in which I didn't exist. Even our ancient family photographs were archived by her. They didn't fit her new profile aesthetic, according to the ones with Dad in me, as if I were only some outdated furniture that didn't match her new interior design. When I was back in our former kitchen, where everything was regular, I began to have these nightmares. At Auntie Lisa's place, I used to wake up crying in this strange bedroom, while gazing at these expensive wallpapers that were more expensive than my entire wardrobe. I felt as though I had lost both of my parents rather than just one. After my first month at Aunt Lisa's, she suddenly raises my rent for whatever reason, like property taxes. Even though I'm just 15, I suppose I need a job. At that point, my cousin Rebecca kindly informs me about this 24-hour laundry facility. That's recruiting in what she refers to as Chicago's shady area. This dilapidated structure is sandwiched between a shuttered dollar store and an enormous phone repair business that, I'm very certain, never fixes any phones. After glancing at me, the proprietor, an elderly man called Jerry, concludes that I am far too young to be employed. Shift at midnight. My age wasn't a huge concern anymore, though. Once I promised him I could start that night and wouldn't gripe about the salary. My life thus took on this bizarre routine, which, to be honest, still makes me anxious to think about, from midnight until 6 in the morning. I had to deal with the strangest folks you can imagine at the laundromat. The strange clients weren't even the worst part. That location got really frigid. The heater was hardly functional. Winters in Chicago are also no joke. To make it through my shift, I would probably put on 3 hoodies. Did they never include that in the job description? However, Aunt Lisa's rent could not be paid with only one employment. In addition, there are necessities like food and school materials. I thus began working at this petrol station as well at 4 p.m. until 10 p.m. My beloved cousins made the decision to add extra excitement to my life at this point. You see, a quick stop was close to their upscale private school, where the annual tuition definitely exceeded my income. It was amusing to Michael and his pals to enter during my shifts and simply ruin the place. They would accidentally dump their Slurpees on the floor, knock over the chip displays I had just arranged, and then depart, leaving opened packs of beef jerky all over the place. Rebecca was more cunning about it, but she was terrible. She would enter the room with her cheerleading friends, and they would talk loudly about me, as if I weren't there. God, oh God. Would you be able to work here? As if I would genuinely die for you. Take a look at her uniform. It's made of polyester. They would then share these terrible photos of me attempting to tidy up their mess on social media. Things at school also became worse. Rebecca somehow made sure that everyone at the public high school where I was attending was aware of my occupations. People began putting laundry quarters on my desk. On my locker, someone affixed a name tag that said Washer Girl. Very imaginative men. Regards. Since nobody can remain awake when working from midnight to 6 in the morning, I was essentially dozing off during all of my lessons, attempting to do homework at 7 a.m. till 2 p.m., and then starting up again at 4 p.m. till 10 p.m. My grades began to decline. Teachers frequently inquired about how things were doing at home. I just informed them that I was getting used to the relocation. Pete, a homeless man who came in most evenings, was the sole bright spot in the laundromat work. He was different from the other strange patrons. He told me which clients were acceptable to overlook when they were a quarter short, and he demonstrated how to fix the quarter machine when it became stuck. Pete tells me one evening, "You're living life on expert mode right now, kid." For the first time in weeks, it made me giggle. When winter came hard, he vanished. Sometimes I still worry about what happened to him. The building belonged to Uncle Marcus, although I never saw him. He left everything to this property management firm. Late at night, I occasionally saw these expensive automobiles pass by very slowly. I later learned that he would send personnel to see how things were going. I suppose he was observing me more than I realized. Mom is sending sporadic texts like, "I hope you're doing well," but she never answers. Instagram was flooded with photos from Derek's charity galas and boat parties when I contacted her. When your own children are working 2 jobs to make ends meet, it must be good to have so much time for charitable causes. Additionally, Lisa continued to justify rent increases. HOA dues went risen, and utilities went up. It's excellent real estate in your room. That basement storage area that has been transformed, with the strange mushrooms growing in the corner, is definitely excellent Chicago real estate, I'm sure. Dad gave me this old teddy bear before he passed away, and I began hiding money in it. I had the whole idea that I would acquire my own apartment once I had saved up enough money. However, something would always come up when I was almost at a respectable number. Winter boots and school expenses, when my previous ones broke down. I had to cover the cost of the repairs when Michael unintentionally backed his car into mine. The last straw, however, was when I returned home after my job at the gas station to find my room in ruins. The bear was torn up with stuffing all over it. And you know what? I've spent all of my savings. Rebecca insisted that she had no knowledge of any money and was only cleaning. Yes, exactly. Aunt Lisa visits my basement room the same week and informs me that the rent has increased once more. Not by a little amount. We're discussing double. Mentioned that local home values were rising. I calculated that even with 2 jobs, I was no longer able to afford it. Here's the problem, though. This local community college was where I had been attending school. Nothing special, just necessities. While still in high school, attempting to advance. According to the counselor there, if I continued my education, I could be eligible for financial help. I was forced to make a decision. continue to pay Lisa's outrageous rent, or make an effort to further your knowledge. I decided on schooling, had no genuine plan at all. I simply realized I couldn't be there any longer. Things that might fit in my Toyota were packed. The heat only worked if you kicked the dashboard in the exact, precise place, and the automobile had strange rust patches all over it. It was mine, though. In fact, the first night I slept in the automobile was really quiet, parked beside the washing machine. To sneak in and use the restroom, I used my work keys. The driver's seat was fully reclining throughout this whole configuration. Made use of my work bag as a cushion. I grabbed 5 blankets from the lost and found box and layered them. This isn't so horrible, I thought. Then winter arrived. A true winter in Chicago. A type of spit that freezes before it strikes the floor. I was unable to use the heat too much, since the cold caused my car's battery to die. The lack of sleep and the cold weren't even the most difficult aspects. At school, it was attempting to appear normal. For example, try explaining to your chemistry teacher why your assignment smells like washing detergent and is all crumpled, is the reason you keep dressing in the same 3 clothes. What was I going to say when the school counselor persisted in attempting to speak with me? Yes, my automobile is my home. Don't worry, though. It's parked in a lovely alley. Michael, my beloved cousin, then made the decision to play detective. I suppose he became suspicious of my absence from the house. One night after my job at the laundromat, they followed me. The next day, their TikTok included an entire documentary video series titled My Homeless Cousin. Everything was captured on camera. My windows were coated in frost. After the recordings went viral in their wealthy kids' circle, I was even spotted changing clothes in the back vehicle while attempting to study with the light from the laundry sign. At night, people began blaring their horns and hurling objects at my car as they passed the laundry. The police also began to approach more. There would be a knock on my window every couple of evenings. "Miss, you can't sleep here." I drove about until they departed and then returned. I saw my gas gauge drop steadily while driving in circles for many evenings. I prayed that I would have enough to go to work the next day. But you know what's strange? On certain evenings, I began to see this black SUV parked across the street. It was always there, but in a different location. Windows with tints. Engine running first made me think it was police or even a creep, but I never gave a damn. They simply sat there as if they were observing. The temperature fell to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The type of cold that hurts your eyes one night. I couldn't get my automobile to start. The laundry was closed for renovations, and the phone was dead. Reflection. This is it then. I die like this. Like those rodents in the alley, they will discover me immobilized. I wrapped all of my clothes about me and tried to think positive things. At that moment, there was a knock on my window. Uncle Marcus was standing in the snow when I looked up, as if it were quite usual to be outside at 2 in the morning. At temperatures in the Arctic, he simply leaves. I believe we should speak. It turns out it was his black SUV. For weeks, he had been seeing me via the security cameras in the laundry room. I'm sending folks to see how I'm doing. Claimed he was interested in seeing my composition. Who administers such a flawed test? To be honest, though, I was too aloof to give a damn about his strange teaching strategies at that time. Uncle Marcus was standing there in his pricey wool coat, staring at me through the glass, while I was essentially turning into a human popsicle in my car. He's probably going to give me a lecture, call the police, or do anything else. My office has better heating instead, he explains, as if this were a completely typical circumstance. This tiny space above the laundry room, which I had never seen before, was his office. As it happens, he had an entire private area up there. Coffee machine, compact fridge, desk, and even a small bathroom. As I thaw my fingers around this cup of genuinely delicious coffee. Like he's attempting to solve a conundrum, he simply sits there and watches me. At last he says, "You know, I used to sleep in a car with your dad." Which, what? I nearly spilled my coffee. Uncle Marcus, you see, had always struck me as a crazy, wealthy real estate tycoon who wore clothes that were probably more expensive than my automobile. He then begins to tell me a narrative I was unaware of. He and my dad must have been quite impoverished as children. For example, their mom worked 3 jobs, yet most months they were still unable to pay the rent. Not very good. Uncle Marcus takes out his phone and shows me an old picture of 2 scrawny kids eating beans right out of the can while sitting in a car. He responds, "That's your dad on the left." Yes, it was the same silly smile I recalled, but it was on a much younger person. He had been giving me this tale the entire time. Sitting there, I'm attempting to comprehend it. For example, how did they get from being homeless adolescents to this? He informs me about the laundry at that point. On really chilly nights, the previous owner would let them hang around inside. They would assist him with any necessary machine repairs and cleanup. The owner offered to sell them the property when he became ill. Dad had recently received a scholarship to attend college. Uncle Marcus, however, had been saving every cent while working in construction. For essentially nothing, the owner sold it to him. His first property was that. After that, he begins to remove all of these old paperwork off his desk. Contracts, business strategies, and property titles. In the margins are my dad's notes. Uncle Marcus goes on, "Your dad got sick. I had to make 2 promises to him. Initially, to protect you. Secondly, to ensure that you acquired the ability to take care of yourself." Then he looks at me and leaves. I must admit that you're performing better than I anticipated in the second section. I'm sitting there attempting but failing miserably to keep from crying. When the true surprise is revealed. He really owns half the street surrounding the laundry. Now, businesses, apartments, even that dubious phone repair shop. He has also been sending his people in the SUV to observe me through the security cameras the entire time. You don't grumble despite working 2 jobs, maintained your academic standing, discovered survival strategies that most individuals wouldn't consider, even outperformed the manager I hired in running the laundry. The last portion was genuinely delivered with a smile on his face. I was informed by Jerry that you had mended the quarter machine. It took 3 tries for my maintenance person to figure that out. He takes out this key at that point. It's for the flat above his workplace, he says. A whole studio unit. I had no idea it even existed. "It's mine," he said. "No rent. As long as I continue to work at the laundry and maintain my academic standing, I made an effort to refuse, such like this. It seemed overly charitable or something, but he quickly put an end to that. It's not charity. This is a financial commitment. You possess both your father's intelligence and your own unique brand of willpower. I'm spending money on it." After that, he shows me the entire file. My academic records, Jerry's job reports, and even images of those terrible TikToks created by Michael and Rebecca have all been preserved by him. They believed they were humiliating you. All I saw, he said, was someone who wouldn't break. Strange, don't you think? I always assumed he was this wealthy, heartless man who led his wife to treat me like trash. He was actually testing me. Things was a messy way to accomplish things. Yes, but now I understand it somewhat. He wanted to know if I have my father's qualities. It's what keeps you going when everything seems to be against you. He mentioned Dad one more time before I left his office that evening. Informed me of their most recent chat when Dad was in the hospital. Dad made him promise not to give me everything at once. Claimed that I had to first learn how to be strong on my own. Uncle Marcus did, however, emphasize that one should recognize when enough was enough. You've more than proven yourself, child. For the first time in months, I slept in a decent bed that night. It was a simple 1-room apartment with a bathroom and kitchenette, but it was safe, clean, and warm. However, I woke up to a barrage of Aunt Lisa's texts on my phone the morning after Uncle Marcus handed me the apartment. As it happens, Michael noticed me coming down from the flat upstairs and drove by the laundromat on his way to school. It was only natural for him to take photographs. During my shift, Aunt Lisa arrives to the laundry looking like she's going to blow up in her expensive fitness attire, start yelling that I've been seducing her spouse or that I'm attempting to take him away. Like, yeah, Aunt Lisa, I completely wooed him by fixing washing machines and being homeless. Very seductive. Every client was looking. Additionally, an elderly woman who visits every Wednesday to launder her cat's bedding actually began recording the entire event on her phone. Aunt Lisa keeps stating that she always knew I was trouble, and it's absurd how I attempt to take advantage of wealthy men, exactly like my mother. As I stand there in my filthy work uniform holding a mop, I wonder whether this is actually occurring at this very moment. Then, before he contacts the police, Jerry emerges from the back room and informs Aunt Lisa that she must go. She tells me this isn't finished before she departs. I overheard Lisa and Uncle Marcus fighting violently in his office upstairs that evening. Even though their voices were muted, I could still see Lisa yelling about that girl. How dare you? I was so embarrassed, as if I had destroyed their union or something. Discovered later. That night, Aunt Lisa spent the night at her friend's place. The next morning, Uncle Marcus gave me this weary nod and had black rings under his eyes. The strange thing, though, is that my mom started contacting me out of the blue for the first time in months, seeming quite worried. I'm hearing some unsettling things, honey, as if she was entitled to worry after leaving me. She must have received the rumors from someone, most likely Rebecca. Then she and Derek unexpectedly arrive at my flat. Mom is dressed in a new fancy clothing. She looks about my small studio unit. She responds, "Oh, honey," but it sounds more cunning than caring. This is charming. Derek remains at the entrance, as if he's worried about poverty spreading. "Why are you here?" Without giving them a seat, I ask. Unless they want to sit on my unmade bed, there is nowhere to sit anyhow. Mom begins to pace my small room. "We have heard rumors concerning you and your Uncle Marcus." She says it in a way that makes my stomach turn. "Uncle Marcus, what about him?" "Sweetheart, hurry up." She attempts to grin in a secretive manner. "I am aware of your actions. It's ingenious. Actually, at your age, I never would have considered it. What did you think of? This kind of closeness to Marcus, working at his company, portraying the destitute, forsaken niece. He's probably made a lot of promises to you. It's like a smack of understanding. Do you believe I'm attempting to steal his money? Nevertheless, do you not reside here, spending so much time with him while working in the laundry? What you're doing is clear. It sounds harsh, and I chuckled. To whom is it obvious? You. The woman who forgot about me after sending me to Chicago. It's unfair. No. What's unfair, you ask? When Dad passed away, you vanished. What? You married Derek? I was moved to Aunt Lisa's 10 months later, as if I were some outdated furniture that didn't go with your updated interior design. She claims that I was in mourning, yet her eyes are on her pricey watch rather than me. Were you upgrading? In response, I traded up for a more upscale lifestyle with your charity galas and real estate spouse. What comes next? Are you concerned that I may receive part of Uncle Marcus's funds before you do? Derek moves forward. Then everything was phony. Listen up, young woman. I'm worried about your well-being, as is your mother. My well-being? The laughter erupts once more. This time, it's ugly. When I was 15, working 2 jobs and sleeping in my vehicle, Aunt Lisa was charging me rent. Where was this worry? Mom dismissively waves her hand. Avoid being theatrical. Lisa would never look into my bronchitis hospital records. In that automobile, sleeping. Examine the pay stubs from the laundry and gas station. Look at the rent receipts I was forced to retain by Lisa. Oh, hold on. You can't. You didn't even return my calls since you were too busy sharing photos from your boat parties. That's in the past. But she's fidgeting with her wedding ring, Mom says. She enhanced Dad's wedding ring with larger diamonds. We are now available to assist. This amazing boarding school in Switzerland is managed by a friend of Derek's. You want to assist now? I raise my voice. Or did you learn about it recently? I'm learning about the company from Uncle Marcus. Concerned that I could discover something? Take what you believe is rightfully yours. Mom's expression shifts, becomes tougher, and ultimately stops acting like a worried mother altogether. Your father had a brother named Marcus. I'll take everything he gives me. I'm right. His wife, ex-wife, who, less than a year after his death, was married again. I deserve, she begins. However, I interrupted her. You are deserving. Dad was involved in the establishment of this company. He began with nothing, as did Uncle Marcus. While you and Derek are busy organizing charity galas, I'm learning how to take care of books, mend washing machines, and serve people the way my dad did. She spits out, your father was a teacher. He tinkered with Marcus's business as if it were a pastime. Leave now. I gesture toward the door. Return to your ideal life with your ideal spouse. Arrange another charity event. The family images don't look like you, so go archive some more. Leave my apartment, please. Derek makes another attempt. Look here now. You see here? No. My voice is very solid now. I am well aware of the reason you are both present. You heard that I became frightened while working with Uncle Marcus. I'm afraid I might win what you believe is rightfully yours. Here's the problem, though. I'm not you. Money is not why I'm here. When you tossed me away, Uncle Marcus gave me a chance, which is why I'm here. Mom becomes crimson in the face. You dare? How could I? You just worry about your financial account, so how dare you come here and act as like I'm not important? I approach and open the door. You look desperate in that pantsuit, Mom, by the way. Derek is already on his phone as they depart, and Mom is grumbling something about not being grateful. Shaking through the small walls, I slide down against the door and close it. Mom's voice comes to me. This is what I predicted would occur. That little gold digger will attempt to seize everything. Things became strangely calm for almost a week following the entire drama with Mom and Derek arriving up. One evening, while I was at work, Michael ran into the laundry room. He seemed frightened. As it happens, he was utilizing Aunt Lisa's iPad. Someone saved his account, and a message appeared saying that everything was prepared for next week. Lisa, sweetheart, finally we will be free. Michael, being the inquisitive child that he is, get the messages open. It appears that Aunt Lisa never logged out of her iPad accounts, everyone. Derek was the D like my mom's spouse, Derek, or my stepdad, Derek. For months, they had exchanged texts. Michael discovered that all of these emails included plans for them to steal a large sum of money from Uncle Marcus's company and flee together. It had taken them nearly a year to plan. Each time Aunt Lisa increased my rent, the funds immediately went into a hidden account. Having no idea what to do, Michael arrived. In his life, for the first time. This child, who had teased me about my lack of wealth, was aware that his mother was going to take everything and abandon him. I gave Uncle Marcus a call. I won't lie. There was a part of me that wanted to let everything explode up. After their treatment of me, it would have been a good act of karma. Uncle Marcus immediately came down to the laundry room. When Michael showed Uncle Marcus all the texts, he was still trembling. Uncle Marcus's face shut down, and I've never seen him look so blank. He called a few people. It turns out that his lawyer had long had suspicions regarding some corporate accounts. All the paperwork was done by Aunt Lisa, but the numbers didn't add up. No one paid much attention to her since Uncle Marcus trusted her with everything. The attorney examined each account and transaction. Are you aware of the amount they intended to steal? $4.3 million, nearly $1 million had already been transferred to offshore accounts. Aunt Lisa was often complaining about power costs and property taxes. She was also pilfering that money. The worst part was that some of the money was taken from Rebecca's and Michael's college accounts. In order to flee with my stepdad, their own mother was taking their future. Uncle Marcus brought in an entire team of accountants and attorneys. They discovered all of these phony businesses Aunt Lisa had established. She would send checks to these businesses for supplies or upkeep, but the funds would only end up in more obscure accounts. Aunt Lisa was acting very normal during all of this. She continues to share selfies from her workouts on Instagram. She continues to conduct her PTA meetings, continuing to act like this ideal wealthy mother. Derek was no different, purchasing pricey items for my mother and taking her to charity functions, pretending to be the loyal husband. "We had to wait," the attorneys said. "Before you approach them, get further proof." Rebecca, however, also discovered everything on the iPad. One evening, she stopped by my flat. When she asked if she could stay with me, she had mascara all over her face from sobbing. She didn't have a wonderful location to sleep for the first time in her life. Having her there was strange. After mocking me for being homeless, this girl was now essentially destitute herself. Being in Aunt Lisa's home was intolerable to her. She wore my Target clothing, used my cheap shampoo, slept on my little futon, and repeatedly apologized for how she had treated me when she had learned everything. To be honest, though, it was enough to have her realize that having money does not equate to being a decent person. Uncle Marcus had his IT staff monitor every transaction and keep tabs on every account. The idea was to apprehend them just before they attempted to flee. However, Aunt Lisa began transferring money more quickly, so she must have realized something was wrong. Michael's 18th birthday celebration was held the next morning. Aunt Lisa had organized a massive event at their home, arranged for a DJ to provide cuisine, and even put up a mini golf course in the backyard. She was being very kind to everyone, most likely because she believed it would be her final weekend. Marcus, their uncle, determined that we would face them at that point, prepare all of the supporting documentation, bring everyone together. Uncle Marcus told Rebecca no when she asked whether we should alert my mother first. To determine whether she was involved, we had to witness her sincere response. It was an odd morning on the morning of Michael's birthday celebration, like very strange. Aunt Lisa is actually preparing to vanish with my stepdad as she rushes about setting up decorations and inspecting the caterers. Rebecca and I helped set up both the next day, attempting to appear normal while knowing that everything was about to blow apart. Every time his mother gave him a hug, Michael appeared as though he was about to vomit. This whole scheme was Uncle Marcus's. During the party, his lawyer would arrive out of the blue with some essential documents. All the evidence would be dropped once they gathered everyone in the living room. In fact, the FBI was waiting close by. Yes, real FBI agents, since it seems that they have a tendency to steal millions from lawful companies while preparing to leave the nation. My mother arrived early, full of enthusiasm for the celebration. She was acting as like nothing was wrong, even though she hadn't spoken to me since the whole boarding school incident in Switzerland. Derek entered behind her with this enormous wrapped gift. Later on, it was discovered to be a sophisticated game system. He must have been attempting to purchase Michael's quiet. At 2 p.m., the celebration began. These wealthy students from Michael's school are all driving Mercedes and BMW. They were purchased by their parents. Music is being played by the DJ. In the pool, people are swimming. Except for Rebecca, everything appears to be perfectly normal. I'm watching with Michael. Additionally, Derek and Lisa are always chatting to one another and checking their phones. At around 4 p.m., the attorney arrived. When Lisa spotted him, he was holding this heavy folder and had a serious expression on his face. "I'd want to have a photo." She was aware that everyone was assembled in the living room. Uncle Marcus was like family to Michael, even when some of his friends attempted to remain. It was only this voice that caused them to quickly go. The lawyer began arranging papers on the coffee table as my mother was griping about my disturbing the celebration. Emails, transfer data, and bank statements. Some private investigators' photos of Aunt Lisa and Derek together. The room became quieter as he put down each page. He played a tape after that. Derek and Aunt Lisa discussing their intentions, giggling at how foolish it was of everyone to miss it. When my mother heard Derek's voice, she simply froze and stopped breathing. Uncle Marcus took out her iPad while Aunt Lisa attempted to deny the recording was a hoax. "You guys?" The person Michael discovered the messages on began reading their texts aloud, the yelling that followed. Mom threw herself at Derek and began striking him with her pocketbook, which contained a plethora of metal objects. When Aunt Lisa attempted to flee, the FBI men were already there. "Lisa Anderson, you are under arrest for embezzlement and wire fraud," says an agent woman. They handcuffed them both and hauled them away. Derek insisted on shouting that he had a compelling reason. Aunt Lisa was sobbing because we had destroyed her life. However, do you know what was the worst? They didn't even glance at their children. As if the celebration of your son's 18th birthday had suddenly become a murder scene. You're not even able to apologize. Mom became completely crazy, almost to the point of hysteria. It becomes out that Derek had also been misusing her funds. She said that since she trusted him, she had signed a number of documents without reading them, and that he had essentially taken all she had left from her father's life insurance. The weeks that followed were hectic. Additional items were discovered during the FBI investigation. Derek and Aunt Lisa had spent more than a year organizing this. They were prepared with offshore money, phony passports, and an entire hidden existence. Almost everyone has been the victim of their theft. The company, the children, the college funds, and even the charity money from the upscale parties they frequently attended. Uncle Marcus was keeping an eye on how everyone was handling things during all of this. Michael and Rebecca essentially moved into my small flat. We had the entire system. On the futon, Michael slept. It was unusual that Rebecca shared my bed and that we all used the same bathroom. The laundry hired both of them. When Rebecca isn't being rude to her customers, she actually does a great job with them. Additionally, Michael is a gifted mechanic. He solved the industrial dryers issue that the repairman was unable to resolve. Mom checked herself into a treatment facility to deal with things, not for drugs or anything. She had disregarded all the warning signs about Derek because she was so preoccupied with maintaining the ideal, wealthy life and looking flawless. Uncle Marcus took the initiative. He has been educating us on every aspect of the company. He claims that one day, Michael, Rebecca, and I will run it together. Everybody has various strengths. I know a lot about numbers, similar to my father. When she tries, Rebecca gets along well with others. Additionally, Michael has a strange talent with machinery. We all visited Dad's grave last week. It was our first time there together. Uncle Marcus told us more about himself, including how he was still a teacher and had contributed to the establishment of this entire company because he thought that people should be helped. Derek and Aunt Lisa are currently incarcerated. It turns out that it's somewhat unlawful to take millions and make plans to leave the country. Both of them are attempting to place the blame elsewhere. This, if it weren't so depressing, would be humorous. Rebecca and Michael are still having trouble with it. Imagine, for example, learning that your mother was more concerned with escaping with someone else's spouse than she was with you. It's strange, though. Actually, we've improved. Rather than concealing her problems behind expensive sunglasses, Mom is coping with them, just like the rest of us. Michael and Rebecca discovered what it's like to genuinely put effort into things. I discovered that it's not always a sign of weakness to accept assistance from others. There are moments when I look at my life now and am struck by how different it is from a year ago. For example, I'm sitting in the office of the laundry, my workspace. It hits me now that I am in charge of the place. I lost my family, but today I'm doing a lot better. TLDR discovered that the stepfather and aunt were secretly in love and plotting to take millions of dollars and flee. At a birthday celebration, they were arrested. Mom lost it. Went to a rehabilitation center. Laundry taught cousins to be humble. And in some way, we all joined together as a true family. Dad was also playing 4D chess from the afterlife.